Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Fronteras, a Changing America. I'm Anthony Moreno. The Gila River has been called one of the Southwest's last free-flowing rivers. On the program today, we learn about conservation efforts along the river. Joining us is Martha Cooper, Freshwater Director for the Nature Conservancy in New Mexico. Martha, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I'm really happy to be here.
For our audience members who may not be familiar with the Nature Conservancy, can you share with us a little bit about your mission?
Yeah, so our mission is really broad and ambitious. It's to protect the lands and waters on which all life depends. So lots of work there.
A lot of work. I know there's a lot of excitement about a recent acquisition that the Nature Conservancy has made recently. Can you share with us about that acquisition and how you think it can make a difference in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I would love to just start by describing the property to you so folks can get an idea of what it looks like. Sure. This is, it's 140 acres along the Gila River. As you drive into the property, you'll see fields of irrigated hay and alfalfa, actually 88 acres, so a pretty big swath. And along the left and along the river are a lot of cottonwoods and willows and native riparian trees. So there's a big margin of bosque, as they say, in New Mexico. And at the north end of the property, Bear Creek flows into the Gila River. That's a tributary that starts all the way up in the mountains north of Silver City. So that is a cool feature of this property, that it's at the confluence of Bear Creek and the Gila River. And it has this agricultural component and forest along the river.
Yeah, I know a lot of folks with your organization and supporters are very excited about this. This is near the Gila Cliff area, is that correct?
Correct. So this is in the Cliff Gila Valley. It's actually right near the Highway 180 bridge, just upstream of that. Downstream of the bridge is downstream of the old highway bridge, which is called the Iron Bridge, is a property we own with New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. And that property is really well loved by the public because there's public access and it's a place people hike and picnic and bring their kids and swim, especially right now when it's blazing hot. So this property is upstream. Because of the agricultural component, it won't be open to the public, but we look forward to working with school groups and local organizations like Audubon or the Native Plant Society to do field trips so folks can. I know a lot of people in our community are really excited about the property and excited to visit it. So looking forward to opportunities to make that available in a really thoughtful way.
You mentioned there's agricultural work going on right now. Is that something you plan on continuing? And can you share a little bit more about the work that is going on with that?
Yes, I would love to. So we have a lease with a local agricultural partner, Horacio Casillas, and we've worked with him for a number of years. He helps us keep the fences up and keep cows off the property I was just describing, the Iron Bridge, which is really important for letting the willows and the cottonwoods grow. So we've worked with Mr. Casillas for a long time, and he has taken over the haying of the grass and the alfalfa that's growing. And we've heard from folks in the community that they really depend on this property as a source of hay because it's the biggest property that provides that to the community. So we're really committed to continuing to do that, at least on some portion of the 88 acres that are irrigated. But we have also talked, and this is in our lease, about the shifting some of the production to grow crops for wildlife. So one example of that is there are a lot of sandhill cranes in the valley in the winter who come and spend the winter here and feed in the fields. And so we could grow crops that could help provide more nutritious feed for them in the winter. Or we may convert some of the acreage to a wetland. And so just to describe for you what that would look like, the Nature Conservancy owns another property in the valley, the Gila River Farm, where we have taken a really similar approach. We have 20 acres of hay fields, and then we have 20 acres that are a wetland. And so in the wetland, there's standing water. We're getting water off the ditch, so water rights for the wetland. Standing water with cattails and willows and lots of migratory nesting birds in that wetland habitat. And then we also have a shallow basin for a winter wetland, shallow winter wetland for ducks and geese and waterfowl that kind of stop by and feed and spend the night on water. So we have some experience kind of trying to meet both objectives, kind of hay for people, crops for people, and their animals, as well as wetland habitat. And we're looking at the farm and taking some of the lessons we've learned to this new acquisition, the Runyon property.
Yeah, I'd like to learn a little bit more, establishing and preserving those wetland areas. How can that really make a difference in the sustainability of the river and the Gila region?
Yes, so many years ago, hundreds of years ago, the river habitat along kind of the margins of where the water is was probably much broader and included a lot of naturally occurring wetland habitat. So the way that happens naturally is that big floods come, they scour out areas that are then like big, essentially pools that can hold water in the spring and be kind of ephemeral, meaning shifting temporary wetlands. So that happened naturally a long time ago. And because people use rivers really intensively and farm along the edges, there have been levees historically on the Gila, we have less wetland habitat. Now, nationwide, this is true. There's way less wetland habitat across the country than there used to be. And so this is an opportunity for the Nature Conservancy to just create some of that missing habitat and bring it back and provide the space for not just the birds, but the snakes and the frogs and the toads and the lizards, all the things that use wetlands, especially for critical points in their life, like breeding.
How does that affect the biodiversity in the area when you're establishing wetlands like that and ensuring that they continue to thrive?
Yes, so biodiversity being the sort of, the number of species we have here. So the Cliff-Heel Valley has over 350 migratory birds that use the river. And so creating and sustaining these wetlands are one way to support bird biodiversity. And then plant biodiversity as well. If you walk through a wetland, you might smell mint, which is something I do with my daughter. She loves to collect the mint and make tea, but you can smell it. So that's just one example of the plants that are growing on the moist soils beneath the trees. So biodiversity is really related to the complexity of habitat. And so adding wetlands just increases the actual physical complexity, which supports the biodiversity.
Climate change obviously has been a complex issue that we've been trying to deal with in our region. As we're having this conversation, our region has been enduring triple-digit heat for most of the summer. I'd like to hear from you. How do you think these efforts can really make a difference when taking on climate change?
Yes, I really appreciate that question. So it has been really hot and dry here in this valley too. And this property can help us navigate this hotter, drier present and future in a couple of ways that I'd love to share. So how we experience climate change here is lower flows in the river. And so if we can reduce stress on the system by potentially using less water, that's one helpful thing we can do. And we could do that in a number of ways. So one way would be to shift some of the crops to native species, like, for example, a blue grama grass field doesn't need to be irrigated nearly as often. And that could be then harvested and sold as mulch to seed in more native grasses, as an example, or harvested for the seed itself. And that would mean we would be diverting less water off the ditch, which could either stay in the river or in really low flow times also could be used by somebody else. There could be a balance there. We do also, the Nature Conservancy on the Gila Farm has actually done that. We have a blue grama grass field. We've enrolled our water in a conservation plan, which means it can stay in the river. But another thing we can do, as I mentioned, is grow crops that are drought resistant, like kernza, which is it is a perennial wheatgrass that is drought resistant. That would also reduce the demand on water. And another thing that's really helpful for climate change that folks talk a lot about is storing carbon. And so forests store a lot of carbon. Certainly the riparian forest and wetlands are one way that we can help create places for carbon to be stored. But as we build healthier soils on this property, those soils can absorb more water and also hold more carbon in the root systems of plants and perennial grasses. So healthy soils are also set up to be more resilient when it's really hot. If there's perennial plants, they can shade the soil. They can also absorb really intense rain events, which we're having more of as well. So those are some of the things we're thinking about in terms of navigating climate change. I guess one other thing I'll share is we have friends who grow garlic on the San Francisco River on their irrigated land, and that's a high value crop, and it actually matures in May. And that is or June. And that is the period of time that the flows on the river start to decline. So if we can think about growing crops like garlic or like barley that could be harvested and at the time when the water is no longer available, that would be kind of a way to adapt to the system and when the water is available.
Tell me a little bit more about that, how you can take that agricultural component and really tie it in with your conservation efforts. How can you make that happen?
Yeah, well, I think one unique thing, opportunity the Nature Conservancy has is that we're able to use some of our resources to really demonstrate some of these projects. So I have a box of kernza seed in my office that was provided to me by my colleagues with the Colorado River program who are working with ag producers around the basin. So we will be planting that actually at the Gila River farm, but hopefully we'll do some planting next year at the Runyon property. So we have the opportunity to bring resources to really test some of these things out in a way that someone who's just trying to basically make enough money to continue their operation might not have the time or the resources to do experimentation. And then we also are excited about sharing that with our local community, but people in the basin as well. So there are a number of people in the Colorado River Basin, agricultural producers, who will be growing kernza this growing season, and we'll all be sharing what we learned from that effort.
You've talked about developing a management plan for this new property and acquisition. What are some of the steps that your organization goes through to try to get input from folks in the area and that may help connect your efforts with the local community?
Yes, so we have an existing management plan for our Gila River Preserve and all the properties, and this property will be added to that. But as you have asked, we are very interested in hearing from people about their ideas or their concerns related to how we manage this land. And I live in a small community, and Silver City is a small community, so I've been hearing ideas throughout, the acquisition process. And I have suggested that we all kind of come together and have a listening session to share ideas and think about which objectives we can meet, or how maybe multiple objectives can be met in different ways. But from my perspective, getting more input in how we balance the agricultural production with the wildlife habitat piece is really exciting to me. And something I've also given a lot of thought to, and the Nature Conservancy has over, especially in the last few years, is how we can invite our Indigenous partners, and for whom the Gila is their ancestral homeland. So Zuni Pueblo, Fort Sill Apache, Chiricahua, Warm Springs Apache, invite those folks to think about how this property and even our other properties can support them, either with ceremonies or growing crops that are culturally important to them, but basically asking them and inviting them to also provide their input and ideas and see how we could support their reconnection to this place. I think, for me, I think about how this river is at a confluence and how that represents a coming together, and how we can use this property and our other properties to support people coming together in new ways.
Can you share with us a little bit about the partnerships that you have with different agencies to ensure that you can reach your mission?
Yes, so as I explained with the Iron Bridge, which is the downstream property open to the public, that actually was purchased with the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. So that is a strong partnership. We're actually co-owners, and they come and do fish surveys every fall because we have endangered fish that are still thriving on the Gila that they're interested in being able to survey every year. That's why they helped buy that property. But at the Runyon property, we're looking forward to partnering, and just some examples of how we're already doing that. Folks are coming next week to do surveys for Mexican garter snake, another endangered species. And also we're conducting surveys for flycatchers and cuckoos, which is data we share with the Fish and Wildlife Service. But another really exciting partnership to me is the local watershed group, which is the Upper Gila Watershed Alliance, has an amazing project where they're working with local schools to collect food waste and compost it and inoculate it with living organisms. And they would love to apply some of that compost and inoculation to our fields and see how that can help build our soil health. So that's an exciting opportunity too.
You mentioned this a little bit, but what sort of educational opportunities do you think you will have for the next generation of conservationists?
Yes, so to mention the Iron Bridge again, although students have already, and under previous ownership, been out to the Runyon property too, but one local school, Aldo Leopold Charter School, has built into their curriculum that students get out on Fridays. And so last year and the year before, we had a whole day of educational sessions at the Iron Bridge where they learned about identifying bugs. They learned about what a floodplain is, which is the area kind of next to the river that is underwater during floods. They learned, gosh, that was the session I did. I don't remember all the sessions, but it's a great way to reach a lot of students. And another really cool partnership is with the Upper Gila Watershed Alliance, where they bring out all the fifth graders in Silver City to the river each year, and that's called the Children's Water Festival. And the Nature Conservancy has been supporting that because we think it's so important that people, and especially young people, are exposed to our Gila River and have the opportunity to fall in love with it, because they'll only care about it and protect it if they love it. And I can tell you, when they're out at the river and you can see them like jumping in the water and shrieking with delight, they're definitely loving it.
I can understand that. Now, one question I do want to talk to you about is the issue of prescribed fires in New Mexico. The Gila region, obviously very sensitive to this issue, enduring many fires over the years, including the second largest in recorded history in New Mexico. Can you share with us your efforts and involvement with prescribed fires in the area and why you think it's important?
Yes, it's timely because there's smoke in the Cliff Gila Valley this morning where I am, so I'm smelling fires in the morning. And yesterday I ran into a neighbor who showed me a picture of seeing flames at night. So right now the fires that are burning have been ignited by lightning, so naturally ignited fires. But you asked specifically about prescribed fires, which means fires that are intentionally lit. In this case, by the Gila National Forest, who owns a lot of the Gila watershed. And It's really complicated because our forests evolved with fire, and they need fire. They need fire to be thinned and to reduce some of the small trees that have grown up. And basically, because we suppressed fire for so long, we have these big fires that have really big impacts. So, and we also have a drying forest from climate change. So there are a lot of reasons that our fires are getting bigger and more intense. And I am super aware of the tragedy of last year and the communities, especially in northern New Mexico, but also in the Mimbres and in the Gila, who were impacted by the effects of the fires that were set that got out of control. And so at the Nature Conservancy, we work a lot with the Forest Service. We know that a lot of work has gone into learning from those experiences and trying to set up systems to avoid that in the future and to basically have better ways to understand really the fuel moisture, how dry. The forests are drier than they've ever been. And I've heard that we just have to update, better understanding of conditions before we ignite these fires. So at the Nature Conservancy, we're still really supportive of prescribed fire as long as it's really thoughtfully done with some sideboards. And I really appreciate the Gila because the Gila is, because there are fewer people here, we're able to have a more active fire program and let some of these naturally ignited fires burn. Yeah. And they are being monitored and managed by the forest. They're not just like burning and folks walked away from them.
Okay.
But it's part of, yeah.
Martha, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, we're out of time right now, but I do want to thank you so much for joining us. Martha Cooper is Freshwater Director for the Nature Conservancy in New Mexico. Again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anthony.
Moving on, a local nonprofit aims to help unwanted horses prosper in this living here. Our producer, Andrea Vasquez, shares the mission of Dharma Horse.
They were abandoned in the desert to die. The horses that we bring in are at risk in some way or another. We have a long list of criteria. The horses that come, they can be at risk, like some that have been starved nearly to death. They can be at risk because an owner died, and the future that they would have would be maybe go to auction, which could mean they go to slaughter. So a lot of different ways that these horses come. We have 16 horses right now. Dharma Horse started in 2010. And we started here with nothing but the house and the barn. That's our hay barn now. And with the help of many people and some of the companies in town, we were able to build this. Dharma Horse is an equine sanctuary, so that can include mules. So we're kind of a senior horse sanctuary right now, and I'm glad it developed into that because they have given so much to people. They are deserving of that care to pay them back for what they've done in their lives. It's a 24/7, 365 job. We don't get paid. Mark and I do not get paid. We do this because of our love for them. But I wouldn't want to do anything else. The end of life is going to come, and we're going to make that as graceful and honoring as we can because they matter. My mother, an amazing woman, has passed. She passed in 2014. But Dharma Horse started in 2010, and she was a big part of that, just in supportive in every way that she could be. And we were thinking of names for her. It was actually going to be just a school of gentle horsemanship, but it ended up a sanctuary. Dharma comes from the Sanskrit, the root word dri, D-H-R-I, and it means to support, to uphold or support. And we were going, support horses, uphold the goodness of horses. And so we decided that was our name. I had come from Arizona where I had become homeless. And of course I came back here because this was where my mother lived, and I had to get myself here and had helped people to get me back here. So that's coming here with nothing. So Dharma Horse started with absolutely nothing. And I'm gobsmacked by what we've been able to do. It's for their sakes. All of these beautiful, loving creatures that are at the mercy of humans and society, and there need to be places like Dharma Horse where the horses are cherished. They're not a tool, they're not something to support my ego, they're not something to have and then when it's not working out, dispose of. They are sentient beings just like we are, deserving of the same compassion and the same care that we would like for ourselves. We still haven't gained her trust, but it's getting better, is little Pumpkin, who's another miniature mule. So she's had a long life. And so some point in those formative years, when she was like 2, 3, 4 years old, I think someone was brutal to her. But she is, she's the hardest one we've had to get confident and get close to. And the thing with senior horses is they come with such wisdom. They have had, this long life experience. Not that any of them are older than me. This is like the most useful thing. I feel useful in this world, and their lives are so important. All of their lives matter so much, and their comfort. She would be so proud. I keep thinking about how, she saw me through really rough times. She was there for me. She wanted this to happen. She would be so proud of what we have done. Unfortunately, my husband Mark never got to meet her. She passed the year before he and I met. This had just become a nonprofit, and then Mark came in my life. I think that she knows, that she watches, I know that she does, and that she would feel like she started it, little catalyst, she lit the little flame, but as it grows, we can bring more horses. So there's a lot of teaching that's going to be involved to get this to continue, and that's part of the educational outreach, the things that we need to help horses by helping people.
That's it for our program. Remember, you can stay updated anytime with news at krwg.org. I'm Anthony Moreno. We'll see you next time.